Hello, hello. Happy Marvelous Monday, everybody. I hope that you are well. I'm super excited to join you for part two of the conversation. So, today I'm touching on the best ways to handle landlord and tenant disputes. I have received a humongous amount of emails, complaints regarding this subject matter. So, I wanted to touch on it today. Before I get started, let me just say thank you. Welcome to my channel. I'm live on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and now also on Instagram. I'm so delighted that you've taken time out of your schedule to join me. I hope that some of the information that I share today will be helpful, whether it's for you, for somebody that you know who is a landlord, a current investor, someone looking to become an investor, a tenant, someone who is about to sign a lease. These are definitely some subject matters and tips that I'm going to share today. I believe that if you just pack it in your backpack, put it in your briefcase, you probably need it along the journey at some point. I just want to share that the information I share today is not legal advice. I usually come on at or around 7:30, so I do apologize for the slight delay. Nonetheless, I thank you for showing up. So here's my disclaimer. Again, information that I share, it's usually the best tips and practices. It is not legal advice. Okay. I do want to make sure that the information I'm sharing is clear, is relevant. If you have questions, please drop it in the comment section. Let me know that you can hear me okay in the comment section. If you can hear me okay, type one in the comment section. I want to make sure that my audio is clear. All right. So again, I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn and YouTube, and now on Instagram Live. So if you can hear me okay, if you can just do me a huge favor, go ahead and type a one in the comment section because I want to make sure that my audio is good. I don't want any technical issues on today. And then also let me know where you're tuned in from. Where are you watching from? Are you on my YouTube channel? Are you on Facebook, LinkedIn? Are you on Instagram? I always like to know where my viewers are tuned in from. I have a mixed population of viewers, which is why I share information for landlords and for tenants. Okay. And if you have questions, comments, remarks, or observations, please, by all means, drop it in the comment box and I will respond to it accordingly. All right. So let me pause here. Hello, Miss Elizabeth. Thank you so much. Okay. I see that. You can hear me okay. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you for that beautiful. You tuned in from New Jersey. New Jersey is in the building. All right. And so today I am covering the best way to handle landlord and tenant disputes. This is a hot topic, and I know that a lot of people have been, landlords and tenants, that is, they've been having issues and um, trying to navigate the complex challenges and the issues between that landlord and tenant relationship. Listen, at the end of the day, I believe it is important to maintain healthy landlord and tenant relationships. Now, I get it. Sometimes it may not be possible, right? I've been in this space for almost 30 years in different capacities with real estate, managing property. So I'm not usually surprised when things go extreme left or extreme right, which is why I like to slice the pie straight down the middle and give information on both sides of the aisle, hopeful that it will make a positive change or improvement in the rental community. And if you're watching the replay, thank you so much for tuning in today. So again, I'm delighted that you're joining me. I want to make sure that this conversation is interactive and engaging. So if you have some information, any tips that you would like to share, please feel free to do so. All right. And I'm sharing strategies, I'm sharing tips, but I also have some questions for you about some of the things that I'm going to talk about today. All right. So, one of the things that I've come to find out is that when it comes to tenants, let me just touch on the tenant piece relatively quickly. Some tenants when they are new, or maybe they have recently signed a lease, or maybe they never had a good or positive relationship with their landlord. Sometimes there are questions that have never been asked, and because they didn't ask the questions, they didn't have answers, which leads sometimes tenants to assume that whatever their thought, whatever their belief is the golden rule. And sometimes that could be false. Sometimes they may have a good idea, but in many cases, there's usually a misunderstanding when communication is just not clear. All right. And so it can definitely strain relationships. Okay. That's one of the biggest things that I've seen when it comes to disputes between landlords and tenants. When that relationship is strained, sometimes it is extremely hard to get it back on course. One of the things that I always say is that never burn a bridge. I always say to landlords and property managers to treat your business like a business. Don't get emotional. Don't disrespect tenants. And I also share the same tips for tenants, right? Because it is a relationship. And I like to think of it like a marriage. So before you jump into a marriage or a long-term committed relationship, you usually take time getting to know each other. And that requires communication. That requires an understanding. Sometimes that requires asking questions and getting those questions answered from either side, landlords or tenants. And when it doesn't happen, it can strain the relationship because the two are no longer on the same page. Now, I'm not saying that landlords and tenants should get into a personal relationships, into that, a deep dive into something personal. I'm not suggesting that. What I am suggesting is that, especially for smaller landlords where you don't have hundreds or thousands of doors, maybe you're self-managing 2, 4 single family home, 12-unit buildings, right? And you may possibly have the capacity to have those relationships with your tenants. Listen, I have some colleagues of mine who have lots of multifamily buildings and properties in multiple jurisdictions and states. And somehow they find the time getting to know those tenants. They send, for instance, newsletters out. They send birthday cards. They inquire about the kids and the football games and rugby games and things of that sort. And so usually when it happens, it increases tenants' satisfaction. It improves that landlord and tenant relationship when you show, as a housing provider, when you show that you care, that, I promise, that can go a long, long way. And so I just wanted to put that in the atmosphere because strained relationships, like I said, when that bridge is burned, it is hard to recover sometimes. And usually the trust is not there, the trust is broken. And unfortunately, if that bridge has been burned, like I said, that's something that you cannot restore. And prolonged strained relationships is one of the biggest mistakes that I've seen in rental property businesses. When, for instance, okay, so let me just go this route. Some of you are owners and you have people managing your property. If that property manager is not managing those tenant relationships, they are not, for instance, if they don't say what they mean, if they don't mean what they say, the tenants, they know this, and it does bridge. It puts a it puts a huge bridge, and there's a huge gap in between that property manager and the tenant. And so, if you have a property manager who is, for instance, standoffish, always making promises, not making repairs, is really snappy, and doesn't seem to care about tenants, well, let me just tell you, that's bad for business. You never want to operate in that capacity, and you never want anybody managing your property who is operating in that capacity. It causes undue stress. It could it could be discomforting for both landlords as well as tenants when those relationships are strained. It can also be one of the causes for evictions because of that strained relationship. And I think that if that communication is happening on the front end, then that would minimize a lot of these disputes that we're seeing. And I know that we're going to see a lot more. Earlier in the year, I've said it, and I've said it throughout 2023, is this: we're going to see a lot more lawsuits against landlords. And we're starting to see it. I'm not surprised. I'm not I'm not alarmed, but I want you to know that those numbers are increasing. The courts are starting to fill up with more cases against landlords, whereas before, and days of old, you would see a lot of lawsuits against tenants. Well, now the tables have turned, and so that's why I share this information. There are a lot of legal battles that are starting to pop up like wildfire. And I believe that if landlords and tenants can learn how to resolve these disputes, we would see a lot less cases when it comes to these legal matters. I'm not talking about non-payment of rent. That's one thing, but I get it. Because again, it is a business. It should be treated like a business. And if it's treated like a business, it should pay you like a business. That means on the receiving end, a landlord should expect to receive payment because it is a business. It's not a charity. And obviously nobody can live anywhere for free unless you're running a charity. But in any event, even in that case, somebody has to pay for that tenant to live there. So either way, it's still not free. Hope that we can agree on that, right? But those escalating disputes are starting to pop up. I know that especially in the DC metropolitan area, there's a huge backlog of legal cases that are waiting to go before a judge, that are waiting to be heard. And here's the thing, and I know tenants don't really care, but landlords and property managers, I know that you do care. You probably should care that when it comes to legal matters, and if you especially have to pay an attorney to represent you in court, we already know that's not free. That is at cost. And so if you can minimize disputes, you can minimize expenses that you have to put out because something that could have been resolved. So let me share this story. I had a young lady. I was previously the a board chair for an organization, and in that organization, it had over 4,000 landlords. And one of the young ladies who she's a landlord, and she said to me several times, and I felt her pain. So the first time she said it, I didn't really take it seriously, but she said it multiple times. She said, "Karissa, I just want to burn my property with the tenants inside." And she did give me consent to share this information. However, I won't share her name, but that's how bad that landlord and tenant relationship was. That she had no respect for the tenant. The tenant had no respect for her. They cussed each other out like sellers, and it was just like the norm. And I know that some people, that may be normal for some, but one of the things about me is I am big on respect. I give respect and I command respect in return. But in my commanding respect, I'm not going to be mean and rude and, just God awful. Even in my tone or communication with tenants, I do it in a soft, gentle way because I just believe that if you can catch more bees with honey than you can with vinegar. And I am not saying that that's always the perfect solution because there is no cookie cutter solution when it comes to property management and managing landlord and tenant relationships. But I find that when I am a little bit gentle and soft with tenants and I show care and concern, that usually it builds trust. Tenants can trust me. Tenants can take my word, and they're more apt to give me that same respect. And if it's not given, then I'll speak to that. True story. I was managing a troubled community, and in this community, there would be shootings in broad daylight, like any given day. It was, when I say it was troubled with crime. It was just in a really bad area. So one of the things about me is that I am a fixer. So I can go in, I fix problems. That's just what I do. And so I was walking the courtyard and two guys just started arguing like right in front of me. And they both pulled out guns, right? And so here I am in the middle of the courtyard, broad daylight, true story. They pulled out guns in front of each other. And so one of the tenants who was standing outside, or she was walking by, whatever, she yelled at them. She says, "Y'all just gonna do that in front of the rent office lady? Y'all gonna do that in front of the rent office lady?" Now, I appreciated that, I really did, because I was like, just kind of stuck like a deer in the headlight, like, okay, I don't know which way to go, because the dude on my left, the dude on my right, they both pulled guns out, and here I am in the middle of the courtyard. So anyway, they stopped. So I walked through and I walked into one of the buildings, and so she walked in with me. So I did thank the young lady for that. And although I appreciated that, I think I was more concerned that she did not command that respect for herself. And because the drug guys, it was a high crime area, a lot of drug activity, they were used to seeing me walk the property. I can have a conversation with the guys and be like, "Hey, fellas, I need y'all to move along," right? And they respected me. I didn't try to strong arm them. I didn't try to um, manhandle them. And, I always gave respect. And so they always respected me in return. And I was able to turn that property around really, really quickly, because I built up a level of trust and respect that worked. I respected them. They respected me. I didn't show fear, although there were some times I was a little concerned because of situations that I walked into. There were situations where I walked into vacant units and squatters were there, right? I thought that the unit was vacant, ready to be turned over by contractors or to see what repairs were needed, and walk into a vacant unit, and people in the vacant unit don't know how they got in, right? And we're doing all sorts of stuff. But in any event, I'm sharing this because there is an effective way to resolve matters. All right. And so let me come to my comments section, then I'll get back to the discussion. Hey, Sheena, thank you so much for tuning in. Beautiful. All right. So when it comes to these conflicts, I like to call them heated fellowships. When it comes to arguments and debates between landlords and tenants, here's what I always tell my colleagues and housing professionals. You are the professional. Tenants don't get paid to deal with you. You get paid to deal with the tenants. And so at no point in time should a housing professional be disrespectful towards a tenant. Now, I know that mental health is real. I know that sometimes tenants don't respect landlords. We can't make people respect us, right? But what we can do is be in control of our reaction and our response. And so if you ever find yourself in a situation where you're being disrespected by a tenant, walk away, cool off, follow up in writing, send a tenant an email, send a letter, document the file. And if it is in your lease, I hope that it is. If it is in your lease that tenants cannot threaten you, your staff, or anything like that, then that's a lease violation. Now, in another community that I managed, in the lease, it was in writing that tenants could not threaten myself or the staff. And so this young lady, she was high off of, I don't know what she was high off of. She was high as a kite. So she came in and she was very combative. She came in a violent manner. So I was in my office, and the staff out front, they were at their desk, and the young lady just came in, and she literally just took her hand and went straight across the desk. She knocked the computer, everything that was on the desk, she just knocked it off. So I hear all this commotion, and one of the team members called for me. So I went out to see what was going on. And as gentle as I am, I'm still stern and I'm still a firm person. As gentle as I am, I could not calm this young lady down. So the best thing that we can do in that situation was call the police, to not engage, to not react in that behavior, because one wrong move can turn a bad situation into worst case scenario. We never want to provoke a tenant, and tenants, you never want to provoke your landlord to go to that level, because ultimately everybody's human. You don't know what triggers a person to make them go off on you. And I don't know if you're paying attention to the news, but there are things happening in the rental community I'm not going to speak on, but things are happening. And I will say that some of these situations have turned fatal. So I definitely want to avoid that at all costs, which is why I'm sharing this information today. And so that in that situation, um, the best thing that we could do was call the police. The police came, they arrested the young lady, and she was upset because we had her arrested. And I told her, you threatened my staff. That's a violation of the lease. I'm not going to argue as a housing professional. If I'm in a position as being a housing professional and providing a service, then that's what I'm going to do. I don't get paid to argue. I don't even get paid to form an opinion. I don't get paid to like or dislike anybody. I'm paid to provide a service to the best of my ability. And that's what I do. And so that was in many of the situations that I encountered throughout my tenure as a housing professional. That was one that I can count, maybe a few more, but that was one that I can count that I just had no control over, but I had to escalate it to a situation whereas other authority had to come in and get involved. And sometimes that's what it takes. And then, like I said, you follow up in writing with the tenant to let them know, listen, this happened. Here's a copy of the police report. This is a reminder that this is a violation of the lease, and then enforce the lease. And this is how you treat your business like a business. I know that I have colleagues of mine, I have friends of mine who are watching, and they are, when I tell you, they are some of the most amazing landlords I have ever met. I won't call them by name. I'm not going to put you on the spot. You know who you are, but listen, to my other friends, I have colleagues who are some of the most amazing landlords. They go above and beyond in their rental properties to provide not just decent, safe, and sanitary housing, but they go above and beyond. They buy groceries for their tenants. These are things that they don't have to do, right? But they do it because they genuinely care. And when that happens and you still have a tenant who treats you like sugar honey iced tea, how that makes you feel. I know that some of you can attest to this as landlords, that it doesn't make you feel good. And if you're a tenant and you have a landlord that doesn't respect you, that talk to you any kind of way, I'm sure that you can agree it doesn't make you feel good. It ruffles your feathers. It makes you feel a certain kind of way when somebody does not respect you, right? So remember, I said earlier on at the start of this segment here that um, I like to take the practice, the philosophy that you can catch more bees with honey than you can with vinegar. Listen, respect is just something that you put it out, you expect it in return. You do your best to give respect, and then you demand or command it in return. So, those are some of the biggest issues that I've seen so far, but I do have some tips that I want to share for landlords. These are some landlord tips that I believe that if you just hold on to these things, and especially for those of you who are new in the property management space, you're new with managing troubled communities, or maybe you're going to come into a situation where you have an irate tenant. Hold on to these tips. Put them in the backpack, put them in your briefcase, put them in your desk drawer. You may need it later. If you stay in this career, this field of property management, I promise that something may come along that will rub you the wrong way. All right. So here are my landlord tips. Okay. First and foremost, one of the biggest issues I see when it comes to disputes is this. Um, Tenants are complaining because maintenance, repairs, and renovations are not being completed. They're not being completed timely, or they're not completed effectively. So please be proactive with maintenance. That's a big thing. If you do regular inspections, if you address maintenance issues on a regular, that could sometimes resolve disputes that you have with your tenants. Schedule routine check-ins. Let the tenant know that you're going to come out. It could be every 3 months. It could be every 6 months or once a year. Whenever you're going to go out, you want to be thorough in your communication. letting the tenant know when they can expect repairs to be completed. If it's an emergency, or say for instance, something happens with the HVAC unit, you don't have the part, it has to be ordered, which means that that problem can't be fixed right away. Still communicate with the tenants so that they can know and have an understanding of that timeline. I promise that will resolve some of these issues when it comes to maintenance. Maintenance is top of the list. And so address these matters before they become major. Okay. Be proactive with maintenance. All right. Here's the second thing. Landlords, I know that if you've tuned in, you've heard me tell tenants that they have rights. As a landlord, it's important for you to understand what the tenant rights are, because tenants do have rights. And so I encourage you, check with your local authority, find out what those tenant rights are. Now, just depending on where your rental property is, when you accept an application, before you sign your lease, you are required to even give tenants their Bill of Rights. Okay, for instance, in Washington, D.C., a lot of small landlords don't know this, but these are documents and these are forms that you are required by law to give applicants before they sign that lease. You should be giving them forms which lets them know what their rights are. And so you should also read those documents. That way, you know in advance, familiarize yourself with tenant rights so that you're not violating rights. And I know sometimes I talk about fair housing laws and things of that sort, but there are still local laws. So, with the exception of Washington, D.C., let me just throw this in here. With the exception of Washington, D.C., because D.C. is not a state, there are three sets of laws. There are federal, there are state, and there are local laws. And you should understand what the laws are and understand what tenant rights are. Communicate what the policies are, communicate any changes in your policy, because that will definitely resolve a lot of these disputes that are going on between landlords and tenants. This fosters it does foster transparent communication and an environment that is conducive for that landlord and tenant relationship actually working. And ultimately, that's what you want, because you can sometimes, as a landlord, you can have, for instance, a tenant who, and I'm not bashing, you can have, for instance, a tenant who comes in maybe or seemingly as a bad seed. But if you learn how to nurture that relationship, you can turn that around. I had a young lady who, this was in my earlier years when I got started with managing property. So this young lady had an eviction on her record. Nobody would rent from her. And so I gave this young lady a chance. Now, for me, those are all red flags. And I'll tell everybody to look at the eviction, look at the eviction record, and you should have a criteria of how far you go back, right? So this young lady had a fresh eviction on her record. So she came to my office. She was rude. She was nasty, but I didn't take it personal. I understood that she had been evicted, no fault of her own, because she was relying on someone else to pay the rent. She thought the rent was paid. It was not. And her and her child were evicted from the property. So I gave her a chance, let her come in. And because I'd nurtured that relationship, I built up trust to the point where she learned how to trust, because she didn't trust the last landlord. The landlord didn't make the repairs. And then the person who was supposed to pay her rent while she was going to college as a single mother failed her. So there were many hard stops in that previous situation. And so I can tell you that when you learn as a housing professional, when you learn to nurture those relationships, in many cases, it does help. Now, for those of you, you have a lot of doors, you don't really have time to do that. I get it. That's not your jam, and it may not be everybody's jam. Well, for those of you who can, and if you get it, please maybe try to incorporate that practice. All right. So here's another thing. You always want to establish and honor open communication at all costs. Keep that door of communication open. So, for instance, if I have a conversation with a tenant on the phone or by text message, I'm still going to follow up with an email. Hey, thank you for speaking with me today. Just want to recap that we discussed that the maintenance crew is coming out on Thursday, or that pest control is going to take place, or we're going to replace the carpet, or whatever, right? Follow up in writing. Keep that open line of communication available and on the front row in that landlord and tenant relationship, because if a tenant feels comfortable talking to you, then in many cases they may help you. Here's how that could look. So for instance, let me just use a water bill for instance. So I know that some of you are not conducting routine inspections, right? Maybe you conduct an inspection once a year, maybe once every 6 months. So let me just go 6 months. All right, so you conduct an inspection at that property every 6 months. And let's say the toilet is running, or that shower head is leaking, because maybe the diverter needs to be replaced. So here is an example of what that could look like. When the tenant turns the shower on, water comes out the shower head, but it also drips, right? And that is unnecessary water that somebody is paying for. That's going to increase that water bill. So if the toilet is running and the tenant doesn't tell you, that's going to increase that water bill. Or if in the kitchen, the faucet is dripping, or when the tenant turns the faucet on, water is escaping from the knobs. That's also increasing that water bill, right? And so if you have a tenant and you don't keep an open line of communication, the tenant don't like you, the tenant doesn't trust you, sometimes they don't care. They don't, especially if they don't have to pay the water bill. They're not going to call and say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. Landlord, my toilet is running. Or Mr. and Mrs. Landlord, when I turn the faucet on in the kitchen, water's just spraying everywhere. Sometimes if that landlord and tenant relationship is strained, they can give 3 cares if you know or don't know, because they say, well, I don't have to pay the bill. It's not my responsibility. I don't like my landlord anyway. And that's sometimes that's the deal. That's what happens. And so you always want to establish and honor that open line of communication. And so, hey, Willie Mae, thank you so much for tuning in. You said, what if the property manager violates all tenant rights, invade their privacy, and also enter the apartment and steal their property without their knowledge? Wow, that's a loaded question. And I'm so glad that you posted this question, because I do know that this happens, and it happens more often than not. It happens too frequently. But if a property manager violates tenant rights, again, I did share that tenants have rights, and I did share that landlords should know the tenant rights. No landlord, I'm going to pull your question back up, but let me minimize it for a second. So let me just emphatically state that, as a matter of fact, let me go back to my previous. That's there. Okay. Understanding tenant rights. So no landlord, no housing professional, nobody, unless it is an emergency. And I mean an extreme emergency, nobody should be walking into tenant properties, tenant homes rather, without advance notice. It should always be in writing. And depending on where that rental property is located, that would determine how much time a housing provider must give that tenant. In some places, it's 24 hours. In others, it could be 48 hours. And so landlords, please know what that time period looks like, because some tenants know the law. They know their rights more than you do, which is why I'm telling you the importance of understanding tenant rights. Okay, so if the property manager walks into the apartment, first and foremost, it should be in writing, okay? And if the privacy is invaded, tenants can take action. You can take your landlord to court for violating your rights. Now, if you can prove, let me speak to stealing property, because here's what I want you to know. And I know that sometimes things happen, people get sticky fingers. I've had it happen to me where I had a contractor who came into my home and I had an envelope of payments that I was supposed to deposit in the bank. And the envelope just disappeared. It had cashier's checks, it had money orders, it had cash in it. And yeah, I was peeved. But when people get sticky fingers, it's not what we know, is what we can prove. So can you prove as a tenant? Hear me when I say this. Let me minimize this. I'm going to come back to that. So if you are stating that, whether it's the property manager or maintenance, the contractor, whoever, if you are alleging that somebody has stolen your property, first and foremost, let me apologize to you for having that experience. But you want to be able to prove it. Okay. So do you have pictures of the area, what it looked like before they came in? Do you have now I'm not talking about like 2, 3, 4, 5 days earlier. I'm talking about before they came into the property. Do you have pictures of that area showing what was there? And did you take pictures after they left? Are those pictures time and date stamped? Because if you don't have that information, you may have a hard time proving that it actually happened unless there is a confession. But if it happens and you have proof that it happens, and unfortunately, I know that sometimes you don't think to take pictures, and you just trust that people are going to do the right thing, right? This is your home. You never expect for someone to come in and to remove anything. I don't care who it is. But sometimes stuff happens, right? Life happens. But if it is happening and if you can prove it, you can, number one, you should call the police. Okay, get a police report, document it, and report it. And like I said, as a tenant, you can take that housing provider to court if your rights are violated. But that is a good question, and I'm so glad that you put that up there. And that's why I do this, because I know that I have a population of viewers who are tenants and others who are landlords, and they just tune in to get information. So thank you for that. I do hope that I answered that question for you, Willie Mae. But definitely, manager has violated your rights. Follow up in writing. If there's a corporate office, you can definitely escalate it, right? So if the property manager has an area manager, or if there's a corporate office, you can send an email letting them know, listen, on June the 13th, I had my property manager who came in at 2 p.m. after they left. Or maybe my property manager did not give me advance notice that they were coming. As a tenant, my rights were violated. Now, I would also suggest that you quote or you cite your rights based off of that jurisdiction. So one of the things that I've done was shown tenants where to go on the website, just depending on where the property is located. They can get a copy of their rights. When they email their landlord or the property manager, they put a link of that in that email communication to the landlord, to the corporate office, so they can see what they're referencing. They can see what the source is they're citing to confirm that the rights were violated. So always document that. Always document it. And if you, like I said, if you can get it in writing, good. If you can take pictures of it, that's even better. But definitely follow up, and don't let that go unnoticed, and don't let that go unresolved, because if it happened once, it could happen again. And that should be a big no-no. All right, so here are my tips for tenants. I shared tips for landlords. Here are my tips for tenants. First and foremost is this. Understand your lease. Know what the lease says. Know what you can and cannot do. You want to familiarize yourself with the terms and the conditions of that rental lease agreement. Because when you understand the lease and you know what is in writing, you will be able to determine whether or not, as we saw with the prior comment, whether or not your rights have been violated. I'm not sure why that's such a tongue twister today, but in any event, familiarize yourself with your lease as a tenant. Pay special attention to clauses as it pertains to the rent, to maintenance responsibility. I know that sometimes that's a big issue. For instance, sometimes there is a disconnect. Here's why I said that. Let me minimize this and I'll come back to it. So when it comes to maintenance issues, if you know your role, you know what you're responsible for, you should not be asking your landlord to take care of something that you're responsible for. So for instance, if it's your responsibility as a tenant to change a light bulb, then if you contact that landlord, they're going to tell you, well, we don't change light bulbs. You got to change your own light bulb. But if you don't understand what's in your lease, what you agreed to, then you may say, well, how am I supposed to change a light bulb? I don't have a ladder. I can't get up there. And then there's a dispute over that because you can't reach it. Or, and here's what I've had happen in some rental communities where there are a special type of light bulb. So for instance, it's not just a regular screw-in light bulb, right? There's this long or special type of light bulb that is required. And if the tenant signed the lease saying that they agree to all the terms of that lease agreement, then you're responsible. And so I've had to tell tenants, listen, I apologize, Mr. and Mrs. Tenant, we don't change light bulbs. However, I'm willing to negotiate sometimes if I can, not always possible, that if they have the light bulb and if, for instance, they are elderly or disabled, right, then maybe I'll get maintenance to go in to take care of it. There have been situations where I've changed light bulbs for tenants just because, especially in the elderly community or people who are disabled and just can't get it done. I definitely want to make sure that they are able to at least have lighting, right? So familiarize yourself with your lease. Here's another tip for tenants. Document everything. Keep a detailed record of all communication, not some, but all. Keep a record of, here's why this is important. And I've shared it before. I'll share it again. You want to document when you report your issues. That's going to be important for you as well as your landlord if something comes up. But here is why it's important for you as a tenant, because you have a record of what you submit. Now, there are some rental communities where landlords have a tenant portal. The tenants can go online and can see when they reported their issues. But for small landlords and communities that don't have a tenant portal, you don't have access to go online. You can't always go online to see and to look at when you reported things. So you always want to keep a detailed record, okay? Keep a record of when you report your maintenance issues. That's going to be important for you because sometimes things happen. And I don't know about you, but sometimes the busyness of life and just seeing how much life is actually lifing with all the issues that are going on, sometimes you may think that you reported a problem to the landlord when in fact you didn't. Here is an honest mistake I've seen some tenants make. So for instance, the tenant had a tenant who said, well, Karissa, I told my landlord that my kitchen sink was stopped up. And when I talked to the landlord said, well, no, she only told me that her garbage disposal was acting up from time to time. Now, because something was lodged down in the garbage disposal, eventually that kitchen sink was starting to back up. Then it eventually was stopped up. But because when the tenant communicated, the tenant said one thing and what they thought was the problem, the landlord did not hear it the same way. And so essentially, the tenant never told the owner that the kitchen sink was stopped up. They only complained about the garbage disposal. And yet a garbage disposal can have an issue without the sink being stopped up, right? And so sometimes those um, those lines are they're like very fine lines, right? And there could be a huge dispute over something as simple as a really honest mistake where the tenant thought that they told the landlord that the sink was stopped up. But they only mentioned the garbage disposal. And because the garbage disposal, when the landlord hear that the garbage disposal acts up sometimes, then maybe they're going to get a maintenance person to come out, or maybe they order a garbage disposal and they're waiting for it to be delivered versus saying, hey, listen, I know I said that the garbage disposal was acting up, but now I have no water. That's the water's not leaving the sink. It just stays in the sink, right? Just break it down and have that conversation with the landlord so that they will understand how severe that situation is, because now that's an emergency versus the garbage disposal that sometimes act up. Yeah, that needs to be repaired, but that's not an emergency. And so when there's an emergency, then that escalate someone coming out a lot sooner. Maybe now a plumber need to come out today versus them ordering a part and waiting 2-3 days for the part to come in and it be installed. All right, so let me pause here. Let me go to my comment section, then I'll come back. All right, so Willie Mae, here is your next comment. You said, I have a video of her coming into my cousin's home. She had hidden cameras in her apartment and have a video she gave me. Also, I have a document of her stating she removed my latch off the door. Okay, so you said you reported to South Carolina Human Affairs, and you also have a police report. She is now retaliating against me. Listen, retaliation in many states is unlawful. And so if that's happening, you definitely want to document that. That's a no-no at all costs. And so I'm sorry that your cousin had to experience that. Nobody should have to experience that. All right, so let me go to my next tip for tenants today. I shared how you want to know what's in the lease, how you want to document everything. And third, and as important for tenants, communicate clearly. Let me bring it up on the screen. All right. So you want to communicate clearly and promptly. So remember, I gave the scenario of sometimes an honest mistake, how things can just appear to be or seem to be one way when it's actually something completely different. Be clear and definitely be prompt. Don't wait 2, 3, 4 weeks as a tenant. Don't wait that long to report an issue to your landlord, right? And so if you know, for instance, it creeps me out to talk about this, but if you notice, for instance, there's an issue, let me minimize this. If you notice, for instance, there are roaches in the rental property, right? You see a couple of roaches here or there. Not suggesting that they're your fault or not. It could come from your neighbor. It could come from anywhere. It could come from maybe someone who came to visit you, dropped the roach or whatever, right? So before the problem becomes so bad where it's infestation, you see a few here, you see a few there, promptly report that to your landlord. Don't wait until it's so bad you have roaches running all over the place and now you have this huge issue or argument with your landlord because you got all these roaches in your rental home and the landlord is seemingly not caring or not doing enough to get rid of the problem. Let me just tell you this, okay? And I want you to hear this from my heart, okay? I'm also a housing inspector, amongst a lot of other things when it comes to rental property. I've never seen infestation occur overnight, meaning that the problem had to start small. And because the problem was not corrected, it got bigger and it got bigger, it got worse, right? And so let me define infestation. Infestation, please make a note of this. When it comes to pest control, infestation is defined as 2 or more. 2, not 200, not 20, not 2,000. Infestation is defined as 2 or more, because all it takes is 2 to mate, and then the reproduction cycle starts. Okay. So when you see issues, when you see bed bugs, when you see roaches, when you see mice, when you see a rat, when you see that problem, promptly report that to your landlord. All right. Communicate clear and promptly. All right. And addressing these issues with your landlord as it comes up, this will definitely minimize any issues in a quicker way. All right. So, Christina, you said take pictures, send it to the landlord as well. It helps them get a better understanding of what you are explaining. That is such a good point. Thank you for that, Christina. Definitely, as a tenant, when you have issues, sometimes you may not know what to explain to your landlord. This is a good point. Take a picture. As a matter of fact, also take videos. Okay. So let me wrap up here because I am drawing near on my time. So I shared tips for landlords. The 3 that I shared for landlords was to be proactive with maintenance, to understand tenant rights, and to establish an open and honor that open line of communication. The 3 tips that I shared for tenants today was, first and foremost, to know what your lease agreement says, to definitely document everything, okay, in writing, by way of pictures, by way of video, and then also to communicate clearly and promptly. When we think about issues in a rental community, keep in mind that they will not go away on its own. And so incorporating some of these tips could minimize issues. Things are not always going to be perfect. A lot of people don't tune in. So this is why I ask that you share this information. It costs you nothing but your time to show up. This is absolutely free. I'm live on Facebook. I'm live on LinkedIn. I'm live on YouTube. And now I'm also going to be live on Instagram. 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every Monday. Right here is where you can find me. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel. On my YouTube channel, you will be notified when I am live and online. So let me pull up my YouTube channel for you, because I want to make sure that you be the first to know when I'm live and I'm online. So on YouTube, please look me up. Landlord Life with Karissa Spann. I am the abundantly blessed landlord and tenant expert. It costs us nothing but our time to meet virtually online. If you have questions, if I'm not online, if you have comments, if you have observations, remarks, or if there's a subject matter that you would like for me to cover, please email me. Here's my email address. It's at the bottom of the screen. info@landlordlife.com. That is my email address. Please feel free to email me. Thank you so much for joining me today. And again, this is where you can find me each and every week, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I do hope that this was helpful. If there is something that I may have missed, something that I did not touch on today, feel free to let me know. Okay. I thank you. My time is up, and I definitely appreciate you for yours. Please make sure that you are tuning in each and every Monday. Okay. And if you're watching the replay, again, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. I enjoy doing this. All right. Hello, Juan Johnson. Are you still having the Affordable Rentals Section 8 workshop? Thank you so much for that. I am not sure why I didn't share that, but thank you, Juan. Yes, I am. So let me see if I have that information. So let me share this. I have the pleasure of showing people how to find and apply for affordable housing. Section 8, low income housing programs. All right, so let me put this information up on the screen. Give me 1 second. All right, so Anybody interested in learning how to find and apply for affordable housing programs such as Section 8, please go to their website right now, sign up. The workshop is absolutely free. It is mind-blowing to me why people are not taking advantage of these resources that are available. Okay. I recognize that all the feedback that I'm getting from people who are looking for affordable housing, sometimes I talk about Section 8. I have specialized in affordable housing in my career for almost 30 years. I've always been in the affordable housing space. And so, as a landlord and tenant expert, I am now trying to help people find and apply for affordable housing. It's something that I'm passionate about. And so if you want more information, please go to the website right now, tenant-lyfe.com, and sign up today. The next workshop is tomorrow. Okay. I am starting to conduct these workshops monthly. So go to the website today because spots are limited and they are filling up because, again, this is free. Anybody that needs or want affordable housing, I'm showing you where to go. I'm providing you with those resources because there is a huge push to maintain and to preserve affordable housing. The government is pouring a lot of money into communities so that people can have access to affordable housing, especially low income housing. What does that mean? That means it's rent. The tenant's rent is based off of their income. Okay. And so this is not the webinar for it, but sign up on that website right there, tenant-lyfe.com. Sign up for that workshop. So thank you so much for that, Juan. All right. So again, thank you for tuning in. I shared a lot today. Thank you for your feedback. You said, Christina, you sign up. Awesome. Tell all your friends to sign up. Listen, tell your neighbor, tell your loved one, tell your friend, sign up and do it today. Anybody that is in need of housing information, I promise I give my all. I go above and beyond. All right. So thank you. I'm going to say goodbye for now. Some of you I'll see on the workshop tomorrow. Others I'll see you next week. Have an amazing evening. And this is the holiday season. A lot of you are starting to celebrate the holiday. Listen, as a matter of fact, let me do this before I log off today. I know because I just received a text message. Somebody asked me for my Cash App. I don't usually do this, but let me put my Cash App up right now. So that is no question. If you want to remember me during this holiday season, that is my Cash App. All right. Somebody just text me for that information. Can you share your Cash App so that I can send you some holiday cheer? Absolutely. That's my Cash App right there. All right. So little laughter, little cheer. Thank you for your support. Thank you for showing up. I look forward to seeing you all. Some of you I'll see tomorrow. Some of you I'll see next week. Bye for now.